Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have a returning good brother to the temple. Previously here for Shadow Quest, now here for Feudal Hearts, which its quick start is currently available and will be heading to Kickstarter fairly soon. The one and only Deakin Bennett. How you doing today, man?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Oh, I'm told that I'm supposed to be under a winter weather advisory in April, but I haven't seen any snow yet.
Yeah, it's raining like crazy today here. I'm glad I'm in my basement hiding from everything. It's very wet out there.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on and for braving time zone hell once again.
We're not too far off. I'm East Coast, so you're good.
Yeah, it's a matter of principle.
Hmm.
So, now the last time I had you on was for Shadow Quest, which unfortunately did not pan out. Is Feudal Hearts, does that have a bit of the DNA that you had intended with Shadow Quest, or did you start from scratch?
No, it has a lot of the DNA. Some of it had to do with, some of it's just a name change in a lot of ways, and a refinement as I continue to play test and put together what I want this to look like and sound like. And another thing was Shadow Quest is literally a game that got released at the same time. I think it was a mobile game around the same time I was coming out with Shadow Quest or working towards it. So it just seemed to need a different name, if you will. But the primary goal of Shadow Quest, in terms of what kind of made it stand out in part, was the quest system or the work system as it is now in Feudal Hearts. So a lot of it's still there. It's just kind of a rebrand to get away from the competition.
Oh yeah. And with that kind of thing in mind, I believe when it comes to the die setup, you're using what you refer to as a clash system.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about that. Is this going to be a case where most combat checks and a lot of checks in general are contested?
Yes. The gameplay has 3 types of rolls: ability checks, clash dice, and dodge rolls. That's pretty much it. Just about every dice roll that you're rolling falls under those 3 umbrellas. And ability checks are sometimes contested against a difficulty, but for the most part, everything is contested.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. And in that same vein, when it comes to doing roles that don't have a direct opponent like that, is it rolled with a D10? What is it rolled with?
Okay. Well, this is what makes my game system a little different. And as I've looked at what direction I want to go with this, I didn't want to do changes just for the sake of changes. I think that's why a lot of people fall back on D20s and percentile dice, because they want to they don't want to just change something just to be random. But so when you're doing something like a ability check, or sometimes for your clash dice, and sometimes for your dodge roll, we use D4, D6, D8, or D12s. And those are the dice those reflect progression, but also variety. So when you have a character who kind of starts off And if you're focused on just combat or magic, you're probably going to have a pretty low expert die. And if you are focused more on social intrigue or social stuff, you're or particular skills that have
Mm-hmm.
less to do with combat, you might have a little bit more of an expert die. So um, that's how that's factored in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does sound like this is built more around die values rather than um, set modifiers. Would that be accurate?
Yes, I do not want to have a lot of modifiers, I didn't want a lot of math. I wanted things to be pretty simple, so I wanted people to feel like they could just jump right in and start playing without having to necessarily become an arithmetician.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the modifiers are pretty low in terms of everything kind of falls on your abilities, which there's 5: vigor, agility, cunning, notice, and presence.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that, and then a couple things like your fighting score, your magical score, and those kind of contribute and work with the dice that you have available to you. So
Mm-hmm.
there's numbers that you have very accessible on your character sheet that just kind of let you know like this is where you're at with this, um, and
Mm-hmm.
you just kind of look at that and roll your dice.
Yeah. So when it comes to things like fighting score and magical score, I could assume that that is um, your overall aptitude with combat or with magic. Um,
Yep, that's correct.
so if that ends up if that ends up increasing, which it sounds like it can be a bit more fluid, how is that going to affect, say, Clash Dice?
Well, the emphasis of the game is multi-classing and kind of creating the character you want. Um, in terms of the mechanics and the archetype of a character you'd want to play. And so, in order to, when you have multi-classing, you have to balance that in some way. So, the expert die, the fighting score, and the magical score are the things that increase, um, but are also kind of capped or limited in how they increase. So that, let's say that you're taking all 5 of your classes are of like a fighter hybrid type, for example, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have a high fighting score. But it does caps at 10. So there is a limitation, and that's kind of it's been really fun to theory craft what you can do or what you can get away with or how you would try to max something without that kind of punishment feeling of I didn't think this through, so now I'm screwed. That's been the hardest part of balancing,
Mm-hmm.
because I think a lot of people know that feels like when you're creating a game and then you, whether you're a min maxer or not, or you're someone who just likes to play your game, you play the game. You don't want to have that experience where you're 7 sessions in and you're like, oh, I took this one thing, so now I'm weak. So fighting score and my magical score was my way of kind of dealing with several issues that I've noticed in tabletop role playing games, such as like
Mm-hmm.
Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder. It was kind of my way of dealing with um, balancing leveling up,
Mm-hmm.
multi-classing, but also having abilities that you can use and that you want to use without feeling like you're wasting them or you want to hold on to them because you're waiting for that opportunity that's better because you're worried this maybe isn't the right opportunity to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that went into it, and like the reasoning for this as the undercurrent of the structure, but that's kind of the main the main ones.
Mm-hmm. I can get that. And speaking of the magical score part of things, that it you do have you do have spell power as part of these stats, but one thing I'm curious on
My gosh. This is
is
my favorite part of this that I came
yeah.
up with. This is insane what I came up with. This is what I wish Dungeons and Dragons would have done. Um,
So it sounds like you're not
frankly,
using the Vancian model. Good.
no, it's not. Um, it's I don't know. I have there's 3 tiers to magic. When can cast a spell or you can cast a ritual. That's kind of how I handle casting time. And then there's just one description of the spell, and they're all written narratively. that's that's another goal of the game, is I'm trying to balance these play styles and DM styles that are wanting story versus wanting game play, if you will. When I say gameplay, I mean, like we're playing a game right now in terms of grid combat and I'm the strongest or I'm winning or I'm losing. That kind of conflict that sometimes exists between players' interests and DM's interests. So when I have I look at a spell and how it's described and how it's written, all of the spell blocks, there's just one spell block, and there's certain words that are bolded, and that is how spells scale.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have access to a circle of magic, you have access to all of those spells and rituals. And then if you were to increase your magical score, you could depending upon if you have enough magical score to increase it to, you could make that simple spell into a strong spell or strong level, or wondrous, which is the top level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can certainly get that. And is this going to be a case where it's on spell points? Is it on cast until you get tired? How are you taking the limitation?
So here's the limitation. When you attempt to cast a spell, you don't just get it, you have to make a magic check. And I've used the word DM before, right? Because I'm a huge Dungeons & Dragons fan. That's my first tabletop role-playing game experience, and I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons for some time now. So when I say DM, I don't mean Dungeon Master, I mean Disaster Master. So if you want to cast a spell in Feudal Hearts, you gotta make a magic check, and you can fail. So you have to succeed at doing that. And there's some workarounds with that, but that's kind of like the general rule. Is if you're trying to use magic, you got to make a check to try to do it. And so that's one limitation. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The other limitation is if you're trying to increase the ability of the spell, the way that they're written at the simple level is designed to be very kind of impactful and thematic, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to change the whole world. So that's not very powerful. Maybe you could only affect people that are right next to you. That's one example of when you cast a spell at a simple level. For example, the Cold Snap spell, one creature within reach, and the within reach is bolded. So if you were to cast that at the strong level, that within reach turns into a greater distance. And then you have just like an easy little cheat sheet here to help you understand, like, okay, what does within reach mean? Oh, that word's bolded. So if I cast that at the strong level, then that says it becomes close.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I cast that on the wondrous level, that becomes far. And if you want to increase something at the strong level, you got to increase your magical score. If you want to increase it at the wondrous level, you got to increase your magical score.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in combat, it's even harder to pass a magical check, generally. But you have access to the spells as much as you just have them, as long as you have discovered and attuned yourself to a magical circle, which is kind of the technical words of the game. You can learn and discover magic kind of on your own, or as like a side part. You don't necessarily have to have a class just give you the magic. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I've enjoyed the playtest part of it. It feels very intuitive. It also feels like scalable. And I haven't written all the spells, obviously.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge chunk of time is writing spells. But I've really enjoyed trying to find that sweet spot of scaling them up.
Yeah, I could certainly see it. And since you mentioned earlier that you're trying to shoot for multi-classing being encouraged, and I'm guessing,
it's pretty much required.
Yeah, which is funny because I don't think any of the pre-gens in the quick start have more than one class.
Yep.
But with I do see the work part of it, but
Hmm.
is it going to be a case where it is relatively easy to, or easier to get a level in an additional class, and it's not a case where you have to build it back up?
So once you get 100 experience points, you can get a level in a class.
Hmm.
That's the general rule here. And then on the bottom of the character sheet, there's work. You can be working up to on 3 goals at the same time. So if I go to the sample character sheet, like let's say go to a spellcaster because they're usually working on more than one thing. Uh, this priestess here, Shalara, she's working on her class work as a
Hmm.
priestess, and she's also working on esoteric work. So she's looking to learn the Circle of Dark or Dark Magic. Um, so if you had multiple classes, a priestess, and let's say a class level 1 and leader, you could be working on trying to get experience in both of those classes at the same time. So the thing that is a little bit unique in Feudal Hearts is I use a fortnight time system to try to balance things out.
Hmm.
So as you are, let's say you're a priestess. Um, let's see, what does this say? She could once per fortnight, she needs to try and succeed on a check to figure out if what she's doing aligns with the scripture of her devotion, and then if she does that and it works out a certain way, I'm gonna read it out word for word, but if it works out a certain way, she could get 30 class work. So this is what I've noticed is playing for D&D for so long and other tabletop role-playing games is when you have new players or you have players that have certain play styles, both narratively and I keep saying the word like gameplay, but I hope you know what I mean by that.
Hmm.
As I said earlier, um, it's kind of like sometimes I felt like leveling up or actually playing the game seemed separate. So they just seem like two different worlds sometimes. And usually when I bring this up to people who are big fans of tabletop role-playing games, they're like, "Well, your DM sucks." And
Which
I don't think that's an unfair point that people make is that that DM's job is to facilitate that kind of dance
I would
between.
counter that
Okay, go ahead.
with is it the GM, if it's the GM's fault if the guidance sucks?
Well, I would say that it's the it's the encouragement, but also for new players or for people who, um, uh, I don't know how many times have you been in a table before where there's a new player playing and they're a little bit like lost, and even after a few weeks, they're still a little bit lost, and they're enjoying the storytelling part and talking about their character, but they're not sure what to do, and sometimes they're just like, I don't know, with like 5e, it's just like, I'm a warlock, Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast. It's because like, what else do they want to do tactically? How else are they playing their character other than dialogue
Yeah.
and perhaps like in terms of combat or what have you? So anyway, I
I've
try to
I've
come up
had
with the
that a few
work as a,
times.
yeah, go
I've
ahead.
had that a few times, and the approach I usually end up taking is long before we even get to that part. I am doing a lot of coaching.
As a DM.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that would make you an exceptional DM to not only have the care to try to get your players to develop the kind of skill it takes to be
Hmm.
invested in multiple components of a game. But I would say that you're probably an exception. And
Oh,
so
I
what I
know I'm an
wanted,
exception.
okay, all right, flatter yourself there. So I wanted to create a system that feels like it's designed for players and DMs, but encourages them to actually play their character, but not just for the story, but for also the game. So, and with the Fortnite system, it doesn't become this like burdensome, overwhelming, like, oh, I got to do this thing so I can get my class work experience. Fortnights are 2 weeks long, roughly. And usually that's about one adventure. So if you're going off and doing something under the umbrella of an adventure or a task where you're kind of micromanaging day-to-day events of characters, it kind of motivates you to be like, is this where I should try to pull this priestly thing off, or is this where I should try to pull off this adventure a class thing, or is this my moment to shine as a leader? 'Cause since I have a level in the leader class, so
Mhm.
that's kind of the goal here, is to not overwhelm, or is to provide opportunities to encourage people to play their classes, multiple classes, without overwhelming them. And I think I came up with a pretty good system for it.
Which, the funny thing about that is, a lot of times in games like D&D, I've dealt with people who have a particular character idea, and
Yeah.
sometimes that idea doesn't quite fit in with the existing classes. And I've definitely had this problem even more so if I'm
Mm.
running, say, Powered by the Apocalypse, um,
Hmm.
where there's some advantages and disadvantages to the whole playbook setup. But with but just to use myself as an example, um, I like doing the idea of a monk who utilizes a lot of ice magic and has weapons made of ice. There are not
Okay.
very many ice-themed spells in the various editions of D&D, and this is not a new problem. In fact, this has been a problem since day one, unless I go into that giant-ass spell encyclopedia in AD&D, which just has a bunch of stuff that's not going to be of any use to me.
Hmm.
And whenever I bring this kind of thing up, somebody inevitably says, just house rule it.
Well,
House
it's
ruling
tough
should be a
because
spice.
it should, nah, not the whole entree. But I do think that what you're talking about is, sometimes this is an issue that players have, is they want to play the game mechanics versus like the class theme. Like I notice a lot of new players are like, I want to be a warlock for D&D 5e or 5.5, and then I'll be like, okay, well,
They
who's your
dropped the
patron?
5.5.
They did. Wait, when?
Uh, or rather,
I thought they officially made it 5.5 now.
oh yeah, they did make it 5.5. The 2024 thing they dropped, which they
Yes,
shouldn't have
that's what I'm
had to
saying. Yeah,
begin.
yeah. So anyway, people will be like, I want to be a warlock. I'm like, okay, well, who's your patron? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, that's the whole thing of a warlock. But that's a D&D thing. Some people just like the word warlock, right? They like the just the general vibe of it. Whereas the game requires you to have made a pact with someone, and that makes you a warlock. So when you say like you want to be a monk with ice weapons, are you talking about like a martial artist? Is that what you mean by monk?
No, I mean a monk.
Like an ascetic, or uh, like a
I
hermit, or a person
I'm
who
I meant
refuses
a
the materialist?
yeah, I meant a I meant a Shaolin
Shaolin inspired. Okay.
or Taoist inspired mystic who is
Hmm.
attuned to the element of winter. That was
Gotcha.
always that was always the pitch. Uh, I understand I understand where you're, and I sometimes will use monk in that sense as a shorthand,
Hmm.
but I always prefer the idea of instead of having role playing and mechanics, or especially combat, be separate things, which a lot of people seem to have that mindset. They should
You
be
can take
looking at them
Critical
like
Role for
two
that.
parts of a taiji. The taiji is what's also known as the yin yang symbol, but
Yeah,
taiji
it
is
comes
its proper
together.
name. Yeah,
Hmm.
they are two parts of a greater whole, and I've seen some say you can't have role playing in combat, and I had said, if that is the case, then explain to me
Okay.
the duel of the fates.
Exactly. See, that what you just said there is one of the things that have motivated me to make this game as well,
Oh,
is the separation between storytelling and combat. Some of my favorite moments of enjoying literature are fighting scenes. Some of my some of my favorite moments watching movies is like the moment where it's almost like stuff slows down, even though
And
it feels fast.
to use a few other examples of doing storytelling in combat, I could bring up the hallway scene in Old Boy, if you've seen that.
I have not.
Uh,
I've seen the hallway scene of Daredevil.
that's a different matter entirely.
Okay, all right.
In fact,
One
I'd
shot.
say Old Boy did it first.
Was Daredevil inspired by that?
It very well could have been.
Oh, so it's a derivative. Oh, and I thought it was cool. Okay.
Uh, nothing wrong with deriving from something. That's
I
the
know.
core of art. Much as some people want to throw around the term ripoff a bit cavalierly, but also the famous one-take fight scene in The Protector, which was a lot of people's first introduction to Tony Jaa, where it's just this, instead of doing any cuts whatsoever, it's this long take with just one camera over 17 minutes as he's just going through and tearing ass through this gambling den. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't point out some of a couple scenes in particular in Hard Boiled. The hospital shootout, which is again one of those endless takes, and the tea house. The tea house served as an inspiration for the game Fear, which is one of my favorite FPS of the 360 era. Because if you look at that particular shootout, you have the entire place getting so trashed that you could probably put fog rules on the amount of debris with the furniture, the china, and just everything getting completely destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a case of just a few burn marks here and there. No, the whole place looks like an elephant ran through it.
Wow.
Just smoke and dust everywhere. And I think it is not only is it possible to do that kind of thing in tabletop. Robin Laws made a book about it called "Blowing Up the Movies." I always recommend that book to people.
He made a book about doing this in tabletop role playing.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
The book is called "Blowing Up the Movies," and the whole idea is taking action scenes from various movies and talking about how that energy could be brought into TTRPGs.
Interesting. So, and I remember I think I've talked about this my last time I was talking with you, is being a player. This is one of my more frustrating parts of being a player, is I like description, even if it's a little bit. And a lot of DMs are just like, okay, 4, that's a hit. They take 3 damage. And that's all I'll get. And I'm not saying you got to write me a book. I'm not saying you got to write me a novel or a paragraph. But I just like a little bit more immersion and kind of understanding what that 4 doesn't matter to me. Like they lose 4 hit points. Okay, well that doesn't really mean much to me. So I wanted to move away from numbers as kind of telling the story, and have words tell the story of what's happening in the game, even mechanically. So that's why I went with injury hitboxes. And then that's how I came up with the clash system.
Yeah, and when it comes to the approach with that clash system, since it is essentially dice versus dice, whether it's a block or whether it's a dodge, are there potential ways through talents or the like where somebody could exert a bit more control over those rolls so it's not fully random? Or
well,
at least skew it in a certain way, not
you get clash dice based on your weapons and your features. So, for example, if you're an ascetic, which is kind of my feudal neutral word for a monk, you could use the life force ability that you have to create clash die to physically fight. So there's lots of how you get your clash dice matters. The weapons you use, the armor you use, that can affect your outcome. That's where fighting scores, fighting limits come into play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so uh, it's certainly not random. It's not like I'm going up against a foe that they have 2d8s, I have 2d8s. Who's going to win this? A lot of it depends on your armor. A lot of it depends on your fighting limit. A lot of it depends on that first roll. So if you're the attacker and you're like, all right, I'm going to kick some ass here. I got my big old axe and I swing and you roll a 1, right? They're going to probably just easily dodge that and then probably follow it up as an attack of their own with their highest clash dice. And so the goal here is to make it like, you're swinging, you're attacking, you're dodging, you're blocking, and then you can get an injury, minor or lethal, depending upon the outcome of those results.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted the clash system is also designed to deal with what I see as a huge problem in tabletop role-playing games, whether you're doing grid combat or theater of the mind with turn-based combat. And I've seen some innovative ways to deal with this in some ways. But if you initiate a clash against someone, depending upon the roll outcome of that first roll exchange, that defender, like what I just said in that example, you roll a 1 with that swing and that big axe, and they just choose to dodge, use their dodge dice, and try to avoid it, they can then become the attacker. So you guys are going to clash back and forth until there's a certain outcome. Whether all dice are gone, or someone gets a lethal injury, or someone runs out of composure, like something is going to happen. So it happens it gets resolved pretty quickly, but you feel like you have agency even if you're the one getting attacked. And so even if it's not your turn, it makes people, when I play test it, makes people really alert. They're like, uh-oh, are they going to come up and clash? Like, are they going to fight me? Or, because I have to be ready if they're going to fight me, even if it's not your turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can certainly get that. And when it comes to turn order, are you doing it on a popcorn approach? Are you doing a roll versus sides like Sword World? Are you doing a traditional roll for initiative? How are you approaching that?
So it's a traditional roll for initiative, using your agility roll. So you'd roll your expert die plus your agility. And this is one of the benefits of having a higher agility, not only for your equipment, but also being able to have a higher turn. You also get reactions that are in D&D called reactions, but in this game they're called swiftly acting, or swift action, swiftly acting. I'm imagining people say swift action, especially if you played 3rd edition.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you can have a number of you can swiftly act a number of times on your in a round equal to your agility. So this is something that kind of creates another investment of players to be like, okay, how many, I'm waiting for an opportunity to get something triggered here so that I can swiftly act and use this. So yes, there are turn order, but there's moments where people can insert themselves through swiftly acting, and then also, responding as a defender when they have clashes.
Oh yeah. And I've seen a few instances of this sort of thing where there's a tendency to play a bit defensive with one's action economy. But it sounds like you want people to go more on the offensive.
I want people to either go on the offensive or realize that you're fighting for your life.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to use your highest dice. That's kind of I even say, I don't think it says it in the quick start, but in the player's manual, it's written this way that when you're in a clash, you're fighting for your life. And if someone comes up to you with a weapon and you have a weapon, unless there's, unusual circumstances, the general rule is you realize they're trying to kill you, so you're trying to kill them. Mm-hmm. And that's what a clash is. That being said, there are ways of, avoiding that, and trying to minimize uh, how you deal with combat, and that's kind of one of the enjoyable things about the system. With like the knight class, for example, they're not going to be interested in killing people that are weaker than them generally, uh, because of their virtues that they're devoted for. So their goal would be to reduce the composure of their assailant. So when you are the defender, like if you're, let's say you're swinging a weapon at somebody, and they're just blocking you and dodging you, you lose the fight. Like you lose that fight in you that says, okay, this is working. No, this is not working. They're just stronger than me, or they're more powerful than me. And so you just, once you lose all your composure, you can't, initiate a clash again until you're able to get that up somehow. So you could stay as a defender. If someone's trying to swing against you, block with your weapon, dodge them, and reduce their composure to 0. Because every time a defender wins in a clash, the opponent's composure is reduced by their fighting limit. So it's kind of like it's a what's the expression I'm looking for? It's kind of like a twist on hit points in some ways. It's kind of like the morale part of what hit points is, with people that are familiar with D&D. So hit points kind of combines in D&D health and physical, stamina and battle fatigue and morale. And I separate those into composure, which is also useful for social mechanics, and injuries. So if you're a defender and you reduce their composure, that's in itself as a win. So you said, like, how is there ways of like being able to do different things with clashes? And I think that's one of the interesting people will find out about this game is how much you can. It seems very simple on the surface, like you're just exchanging dice, but that's kind of where the tactics and the fun theory crafty comes in.
Oh yeah, and because of that, one particular thing I find kind of funny in hindsight is I remember back when 4E came around, the edition I'm supposed to hate, but I don't because the check bounced.
We talked about 4E last time, I remember.
A lot of people were aghast at the concept of healing searches, that and coming up with these ridiculous exaggerations of heard or I healed myself out of nowhere. But a lot of people end up forgetting that hit points have never been wounds per se. They've always been an abstraction that traces its roots to the wargaming scene, where if you're dealing with whole armies, it'd be a bit ridiculous to do individual wounds like you would for a player character in an RPG.
Yep.
I mean, could you do it? Yeah, I mean, but you'd end up with cases like, say, Starfleet battles, which nobody wants.
Yeah, and I think this is where the gamification of tabletop role-playing affects things. People walk in sometimes with these assumptions that it's kind of like a video game or it's just a game. And then so you're at conflict sometimes with the narrative. So if you don't have a good DM, right, that can help you understand that, let me explain to you, like, your character is losing the will to fight here, right? Versus you just got your ass kicked and now you have been stabbed. I think that's kind of what my goal was to not just to help players understand what's happening with combat, but also to help DMs who the game itself facilitates what maybe a DM would lack in skill. And that's what I've noticed about really, like, D&D is a wonderful, wonderful tabletop role-playing game. And it's only better if you have a really good DM, and that's true for any game. But I wanted a little bit more support for people who didn't maybe know how to help players understand what's happening in the world and their game.
Yeah, I could see that. And since you mentioned classes like Knight, I'm guessing that classes like how fighter and wizard have been treated as this with this broad net of effects is
Hmm.
something you're not doing. If you would rather do you would rather do a mercenary class than a fighter per se. And I'm just using that as an example. I don't know if there's a mercenary class in the full book.
Well, there's 27 classes,
Mm-mm.
and they're broken up between fighter, expert, mystic, and then hybrid. And then the reason they fall in these under these different umbrellas is that it just helps navigate the balance system and also
Mm-hmm.
help people understand maybe the direction that they would want to take something.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Um,
but go ahead.
I do a similar thing with Legend Edition. Uh, but what I kind of meant by that, because I recently did a read through of both Draw Steel and Nimble,
Okay,
and
I haven't heard of Drawsteel, but I've seen a lot of ads for Nimble.
yeah, I've done two interviews regarding Nimble, for the
Okay.
original run and for the more recent, um, more recent ah, Monsters and More expansion, and I did a whole
Hmm.
deep dive on Draw Steel, and I will do a similar one with DC 20 when that hits 1.0. Um, but what I noticed with both Nimble and with Draw Steel is that neither of them have a fighter equivalent martial class whose whole stick is you can wield any weapon.
Hmm.
That wide amount of weapon wielding is certainly there, but it's folded into the commander in Nimble and the tactician in Draw Steel. And
Interesting.
you have a similar thing when it comes to the idea of a wizard whose whole gimmick is I'm good with magic. You have casting classes that lean into particular styles of magic, but not a universalist one.
Well, if you're looking at the sample classes
Mm-hmm.
in the quick start, there's I think two for each type. So there's 8 in there total, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think, uh, and including the ones from the sample classes. But I do. You're asking about like this generalized fighter class. That would be the warrior. Um, each class in Feudal Hearts has something called a class talent, which you can see on the character sheet. There's 5 slots for class talents, and the warrior has just the warrior spirit. The thing that decides whether people are capable of using certain weapons or using certain armor quite a bit to do with their abilities like vigor and agility. That's kind of the balancing thing. So the more vigor you have, the more physically you're trained. But just the general ability of trying to be a warrior and a fighter, that would be the warrior class.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as someone who can withstand combat, lives in combat, thrives in combat. Yeah. The knight, they are more. This is feudal hearts, so I'm focusing on like all periods of medieval Europe are really special to me. You know, as a historical buff and a literature person of that time period. Um, so I've drawn the knight is really meant to be more of the virtuous, a little bit of a later medieval component, but that's the point of that knight. So they embrace one of the another part of the game, which is devotions. Warriors obviously are quite neutral. You could take that in any direction you want. So I'm imagining if you're a knight who is, let's say, a noble, right, and you're just like, I'm a knight because my mom wants me to be,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not really interested in being a fighter. You may take the knight class and then the orator class. So yeah, you have that component of chivalry and honor, and that helps you. Um, but if you wanted to be that stereotypical knight, you would probably need to be a warrior as well, if not a hero, which is another class.
Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, uh,
Hmm.
on this on the casting side of things, it sounds like the. Would it be fair to say that the spellcaster classes that you have all lean into particular styles? Like I know one of them in the quick start is basically a witch. Another one is a priest. Uh,
Hmm.
is that the approach you're taking?
Um, so the mystic classes
Hmm.
are, they kind of, in a similar way with fighters and experts, they're going to look at the different components of the game and be drawn to certain things. So there's circles of magic. And circles of magic are not quite delved into very much in the quick start. They're just kind of like the surface is just scratched with them. Because I one of the things I'm really intrigued about medievalism is esotericism. So learning these circles of magic in the game is kind of a cool part of the game, which could involve leveling up or also doing like literally reading on the side as your character, right? It's like, well, what do I do? I'm going to spend my 2 hours reading this book. Okay, well, roll a dice and see how much you develop towards something, if you will. Um, but the characters are, they're familiar enough that people with like played D&D and Pathfinder and other more popular games are going to recognize some things.
Hmm.
I wanted them to each have their own unique talent, so, and then also like some kind of ribbons and flavors that draw, like people that are drawn to, kind of like what I was saying about the warlock, right? If you're drawn to a warlock, there's probably something dark about you. There's probably something like, maybe not you as a person, but about the character, right? Something like you're looking for something that has to do with magic that is a little bit on the edgier side. Otherwise, why wouldn't you choose wizard? Unless you know about the mechanics of the game and kind of the all that stuff.
Why am
So
I
I
thinking of
wanted,
John Constantine?
well, what does that say about you? So like with the witch, for example, they pay a price. That's kind of the game part of the witch, is the witch's levy. They pay a price,
Hmm.
so they have to be devoted to something, or uh, um, they have to be connected to something, or they have some kind of price they have to pay in order to access their magic. Priests have to embrace a scripture, and as a part of a devotion. Um, druids, uh, and there's the mystic classes that are in the quick start kind of give you that kind of broad brushstroke. I think it was what, fourth edition that came up with like arcane, divine, primal, or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
as well as martial and
Martial,
giving you
yeah.
actual reason for psionic to exist.
Hmm.
Uh, is psionics have been a cursed class since day one. The only class that is more cursed than them is rangers.
Which
Or
I never understood that. I don't get it.
I,
I,
when it
to
comes
me,
to it has, I'd say it has to do with a couple things. One of them is the way armor used to work, made rangers very, very squishy, and ranger down became kind of a running joke.
yep, a
The
ranger
other
down.
thing is it's kind of hard to do a very outdoorsy archetype when the majority of the available modules are putting you in underground dungeons.
Yep, yep, yep.
This is also why the cavalier didn't stick around very long. It's kind of hard to do that kind of hard to do the whole born in the saddle archetype in a
Hmm.
dungeon. Um, and when it came to psionics, you had the problem of either they did way too much of their own thing and had entire combat systems just for them, which oh, see Shadowrun Third Edition as far as why that's a bad idea, or they weren't different enough and they just felt like sorcerers with a different coat of paint, or
Yep.
you have those infamous cases where they got spells that they got spell equivalent effects that they really shouldn't, like getting disintegrate in not before you're even in the double digits of level. I mean, yeah, it's taken up all your psychic points to cast it, but it still disintegrates.
I played a really long D&D campaign with a guy who ended up quitting,
Mhm.
who they had played with for years and
But
years. And it was believed that he was cheating because he was I think it was a psychic warrior. This was third edition. I think he was a psychic warrior. And they believed that he was cheating, so they kind of like did something to piss him off towards
yeah,
the end of the game. But
but
I never knew if that was because he was actually cheating or how much we just didn't understand about psionics. And maybe he did. Maybe he was like min-maxing it, essentially, and
yes,
screwing over the DM, which is very possible. I don't know.
and when it comes to getting back to it, in the past, um, what were primal abilities were put in the same camp as divine, which was always kind of odd.
Hmm.
And then when fourth edition came along and introduced the primal power source, which was basically the spirit of the world telling all of the extra planers, play nice or get off my lawn, is basically the origin story of the primal power source, and was not only used by druids but by things like wardens, which were essentially knights of nature. But the psionics was a universe's defense mechanism for outsiders like the Ilthids starting to show up.
Hmm.
And I actually really liked how psionics was used in fourth because it was using the same power system, but doing so in a way that was unique to it. Um,
Right, which kind of resolved the issues of it in previous editions.
yeah, the the problem that psychics have had for the longest time is when you look at how they work, a lot of times they end up feeling like a mage in a different coat of paint.
Hmm.
Um, the infamous Unearthed Arcana that had psionics as just three, that took away the mystic class, which was a proto psionic, and
Hmm.
instead replaced it with three subclasses and pushed the idea of, oh, wizards are just, or scions are just wizards who cast spells with their mind. And I'm like, no, no, that is not it at all. That is the
Well,
complete
not in the
opposite
world
of
that they
it.
created. Not in the world that they created.
Not in the
It's
world that
because
they.
because what I'm saying is
Mhm,
that if there's those circles of magic,
mhm,
and then you're saying psionics is just like a form of enchantment or something, it just doesn't work. It doesn't land because then that means basically like enchanters have been doing psionics this whole time. So
yep.
it just doesn't fit. And I think it has to do with D&D's struggle of like metaphysics. They never quite picked a setting, if you will, and so like
Oh,
they don't really know
that's
what.
been something I've been bitching about for decades.
Yeah,
That
I mean, I've come up with my own system and metaphysical background to kind of support where
and
the things that, as like a
it's
foundation,
it sounds like
and I
Feudal Hearts has a setting to inform the way its metaphysics works.
it does, and I could see being a game designer if I didn't have that. Holy crap!
Mhm.
When I'm trying to deal with some of these issues, with like the awakened class versus a wizard who's maybe takes a circle of magic that the awakened class at the beginning has access to, like
Yeah,
what would that look like differently?
yeah.
And I could see how maybe who someone is like, well, I want to be a psionic, and how that would be less special and less interesting next to a wizard who's doing the same thing. And
Hmm.
again, that falls back on the DM, right? In some ways, like, can they, you know, flavor
Yeah,
it correctly? But
and
who wants to rely on that?
oh, I mean that's something that can be done, but it should be honest. Oh, and what I mean by that is, if a game is going to be built around that kind of agnosticism, it should commit. This is why you don't see me raising a fuss about, say, um, GURPS not having a defined metaphysics, because GURPS is meant to be
Mm.
universal.
Yeah, I've never played GURPS, so.
I have. Same thing with, say, Savage Worlds or Fate. These are
Hmm.
games that are meant to be universal, where there's an implicit understanding that the GM is going to have to do that work. Um, it's not a bandage for that kind of thing. It's more of, much like what I said when it came to someone picking up a Souls-like. You know what you signed up for.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I pick on D&D for this is because I've always felt when it came to setting and metaphysics, that was a game that wanted to eat its cake and have it too. Because I have heard plenty of people across all editions say, "Oh, you can run any kind of fantasy in D&D." But I feel like that kind of comment is much like if your kid um, wanted a Disney princess doll for Christmas and you give them a Princess Leia figure. You're technically correct, but you kind of missed the point.
Well, that's fair. Not only that, though, we all know what it's like to play a favorite game and then use cheats or have like a, I was just playing an emulated server on an old game I used to play, decades ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it was so overpowered. I'm like, this isn't fun. So you have to have limitations. I think that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
There's
there have to be
limitations
limitations, and
help you feel the borders of the world and help
oh, yeah.
you understand that. Like, I just started a new campaign last week using some of the theme that my players wanted to play D&D, but I used a lot of the stuff from Feudal Hearts, like devotion systems, and I'm using the setting Crown Wild to put them into. And honestly, what they've been enjoying that I haven't noticed, for months playing with them, has been how much they're enjoying not knowing what's going to happen and not knowing the world they're in,
Yeah.
right? Not as characters, just as characters, but as players. And I think D&D is giving players a game without giving them a world, and I think that they're giving them a game without putting a lot of faith in a DM coming up with stuff.
I would say it's not necessarily that they're not giving them a world. They're giving them a bunch of worlds and trying to do them all at once. Because
okay, well, Monk, that's worse.
Oh,
that's even worse.
Yeah, because you've got Forgotten Realms, you've got Ravenloft, you've got Alquadim, you've got Spelljammer, you have Theros or Ravnica when they try to bring Magic the Gathering into it. And all of those worlds that I just mentioned are distinctly different styles of fantasy with different tech levels, different expectations, and whatnot.
Yep.
And trying to build around some amorphous blob instead of building a core center, and then ways to branch it out. Because a game like The Strange has its own multiverse, but I don't have that problem with it because it has defined lines between the worlds.
Mm-hmm. I think it is difficult to write a game like when I'm doing Feudal Hearts. I've obviously kept in mind, like, okay, how many people are actually going to play in the Crown Wild? That's challenging to try to create a game that is setting neutral capability, if that makes sense, without it being incredibly rigid. So
it is a balancing act, but
it is. It can be challenging, but it certainly can be done. I think I'm doing it, and
there's plenty of games that have done it, and even if someone might say, I'm just gonna run it in my setting. There's one phrase that one of my mentors often said that comes back up. You need to understand the rules before you can break them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with setting a baseline as a reference point. And if you're not gonna do that, then it's better to make it clear from the start that it's meant to be multi-genre. But my frustration with something like D&D is that it tries to do both of those things at once, and they're not compatible.
I'm sorry, it just reminds me of this last weekend when I was playing this game, and I think the Bandit Captain NPC that I had from the Monsters Manual for 5.5 had a pistol in his hand, and I just got mad. But that's my own thing. We've talked about that before, right?
Yeah,
That's my beef with technology. It's like, what setting is this? What's happening? Why does he have a pistol?
and it's like if you put that same bandit captain in, say, Warhammer Fantasy, I don't think you'd have a
Yeah,
problem because
not at all. Not
you
at
know,
all. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
but and
But
yeah,
it
there
just
are.
shows you though that they don't know what world that they're running. Because I think that would have been like, I don't want to say controversial. That's kind of excessive, but that would have been a little bit eyebrow raising it to do that in fourth edition or fifth edition, right?
Well, they
To have
did
like
try.
the
They did
did they really?
try with fourth edition. They did try and hammer home a particular world that everything was built around. That being Nethir Vale.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, fifth edition tried to have it that Forgotten Realms is the core setting, but it's never fully committed to that. And
Hmm.
once again, that's the problem. Uh, to reference Dr. Cox, it's important to commit. COMMIT.
All the
T.
cheese.
And like I've been talking about Sword World on Sundays, and Sword World doesn't have this particular problem because the 1.0 era, as kitchen sink as it could be, was built around the setting of Forcelia.
Hmm.
Uh, the 2.0 era is built around the setting of Raxia, and it has its own approach to races, to the way magic works, to its history, to its thematic tone, and is largely consistent within that. I remember when I did that whole video about a year ago on why I don't like the Vancian model, which is something I've never liked. I didn't like it when I
Hmm.
started as a kid, and I still don't like it.
I don't. I'm with you. I'm
Uh,
with you.
the question that I would always ask, even when I was 10, was why do wizards need an 8-hour rest?
Hmm.
Especially if they're just reading from a book. And I never got a straight answer. And for that matter, the matter of why do wizards need to read a book to memorize their spells if they're supposedly connected to the arcane, which even back then I saw as something akin to the Force, or just that idea of a heightened understanding.
Hmm.
And you look at the original Star Wars, you don't see Obi-Wan having to read through a book to understand how to use the Jedi mind trick.
Well, I think they tried to explain it with exhaustion, but that never has quite landed with the system. But I think we all have media exposure of people who are attempting to do, extraordinary magic and they become
Yeah,
taxed and exhausted. And I think
which
that's what was missing. That's what's missing in that system is a reflection of I'm getting tired by doing this. This is actually taxing me.
mhm,
Um, and that's what I think. That's what again, that's an example of the separation between like the game itself and the narrative. Like
yeah,
what am I what scene am I imagining as I exert
yeah.
myself to cast this fourth level spell? If you don't have a DM guiding you through that, it's going to feel arbitrary. And I think that's what your 10-year-old voice was saying, right? Like this feels arbitrary. Why do I
Mhm.
need 8 hours?
Not only that, but I do remember somebody bringing up the exhaustion thing, and
Mhm.
I ended up saying without missing a beat that just raises more questions because if it's really about exhaustion, why is it that the spells for each level I can cast are so set?
Mhm.
Like if if I only have one shot of this big spell, why do I still have shots of these smaller spells?
This is actually one of the reasons what you're bringing up here, this point of view, is why I struggle with cantrips in D&D and why I struggle with, using some magic.
Hmm.
Uh, is like, if I can't cast a first level spell, how come I can just sit here and just exhaust all this magic? At almost an infinite level. It just doesn't quite to seem to to make sense. It doesn't. The game doesn't quite fit that, and I know that's at the same time. It's like, well, you're playing a game, like, but I also don't want to feel like I'm playing Diablo when I'm playing a tabletop role-playing game. And I think
Except Diablo already answers that particular question.
with mana, yeah.
Not
Pick a
only with
mana
mana,
question?
but with the nature of the world of Sanctuary.
I see what you're saying. So like the setting itself answers the question.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. That's a fair point. That's a good point. So like if you don't know, where your magic comes from, and I think Farron has done a pretty good job of in Forgotten Realms, trying to do that and keep up with the settings and the world, but it's never quite landed for me as a player, as someone who's familiar with the world they're trying to sell me, and then also the mechanics. It's like,
And
I think that's why I had such issues with fourth edition. But
oh,
I know you'll that's a hill you'll die on. I get it.
oh, I'm not dying on that hill because I'm just gonna shoot everybody who gets close to the hill.
There. Well, okay. So that's the hill you'll survive on. There we go.
Yeah. Because if I've got a perfect crow's nest, then everybody's gonna make a charge in open ground, and we saw how that worked out in the third day at Gettysburg.
Okay, well, I'm not climbing that hill then.
We've all seen at least one documentary about what happens in no man's land in any battle in World War I.
Yeah, I'm not Wonder Woman.
Oh, but when it comes to and like just as an example of this sort of thing, I look at, say, RuneQuest. And this particular problem that I don't have, because RuneQuest has two particular brands of magic. Rune magic and spirit magic. Both of them have very specific effects that you can and can't do, and very specific costs that they require.
That sounds like a very setting specific
kind
of world.
Because it is taking place in Glorantha. When I was writing Legend Edition, obviously because I'm going setting agnostic, I didn't have that option. So I did have to lean into the mechanics side of things. But what I built around instead was the recurring elements throughout.
Yeah, I mean, you have such a rich pool to draw from. It almost would have hamstrung you to try to pick one of the many worlds, or come up with some silly multiversal thing, which is so overdone.
I had considered it for my own setting ideas, but I decided not to. I only wrote when I was writing the Gaia setting for my own campaigns, I did put in a specific rule for how magic works, and magic is more akin to Ki in a martial arts movie than anything else. The idea of this universal force that is integrated with the physical and supernatural world, and anybody who is able to understand it with proper training can use it. Some people are completely cut off from it, but also they're unable to be detected via it as well. Think of like a blank in 40K. On the other hand, it means that they're hard to notice. Period. Like they could be standing right behind you and you wouldn't know. Kind of thing. Which I've handled in the past. There's jobs like the covert ops within Legend Edition that are very much meant to be the person they're not invisible, you just don't notice them. But given that particular approach, it sounds to me like the idea of spell levels isn't something that you have. It's more of a baseline effect that you can upcast by investing more.
That is correct. Yep. You have your access to circles of magic, and the circles are not really expansive in terms of the lists. Sometimes they'll be anywhere between 5 and 10 spells, maybe a little more, and then maybe 1 to 5 rituals. But you can access. I have quite a number of circles.
Mm-hmm.
So the point wouldn't be to like learn more circles to increase your spell power. It would be to refine your spellcasting abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So their circles of magic are kind of broken up into tiers, and some are, and they also feed into kind of the metaphysics of the world in terms of the separation of the material world versus the divine world, and kind of that middle space that exists, which is our mind.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in terms of how you to cast a spell, like I said, you empower it to go up to the strong level or the wondrous level, and then again, that's all a magic check. So when you attempt to cast a spell, right, you got an expert die. You roll that, and then typically you'd roll plus your cunning. So if you roll a 1, that's a disastrous effect, and each circle of magic has a sample disastrous effect that would occur.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a. I wanted to move away from superheroism when it comes to D&D and other tabletop role-playing games that are fantasy, and I wanted to go not like grimdark, but as far as that, but I certainly wanted to move a little bit more towards heroism, where you attempt to do something, you're risking something.
Mm-hmm.
So every time you roll that expert die, there's a chance for a disaster if you roll a 1.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And with all that in mind, I believe you have it that Feudal Hearts is going to launch its Kickstarter later this month, since we're now in April.
That was the goal. Yep. I'm hoping to get this up and running by the end of the month here. Yep. That is the goal. Yep.
And I'm guessing that's going to go for 30 days?
Yep, 30 days. If I need to push it back, I may, because I want to make sure that whatever I pull off, it's successful. So whether I just put it through the drive-through RPG, I think it was when I released the on March 15th when I released the Kickstart. That's doing pretty well. So I may hold off a little bit until the end of April if I want to, because I want to make sure this is relatively successful. And that's so I'm just kind of continue to play test it. I'm gonna keep putting my name out there, seeing what people think about it, get feedback, get more players, and go from there. So it's a tentative end of April, but fortunately the game itself is pretty much done. The one thing that I'm really wanting on the Kickstarter isn't so much money for myself, but I love commissioning artwork. I've really enjoyed getting the artwork from the people that I've gotten to work for me and work on the project with me. I've really, really enjoyed it. And artwork is expensive, especially when it comes to quality artwork. So I'm excited to see what happens. I'm not sure when I'll release it, but I'm hoping to get the Kickstarter up and running by the end of the month, maybe May if I need to. Depends on kind of how it goes.
Oh yeah, I can certainly get that, and I will look forward to seeing how it develops. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery and enjoy the madness that happens here.
Thank you very much, sir.
Anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Well, I've been drinking this whole time, so that's good.
And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody!